It's draft season time, ladies and gentlemen. Your drafts are coming up within the next couple of weekends. We're here to help you get ready for it. A little bit of everything on today's episode of Fantasy Football Today. Dave Richard alongside Jamey Eisenberg, Sportsline's Katie Mox, whose father Mark celebrating a birthday.
Happy birthday,
Mark. Your present is going to be sleepers that you can draft in your league later on in the show. But guys,
does he play fantasy?
That's a great question.
He does play fantasy.
Then he's going to need those sleepers.
Pay attention, Dad. Pay
attention. So I've been on a bunch of radio interviews. Jamey, I know you have too. Katie, you talk to people all the time. I want to know the answer to the most polarizing question that you've been getting. And it's not which running backs are safe in round one. It's not who are the sleepers. It's not who are the busts. It's what do you do with the wide receivers who are holding out right now. CeeDee Lamb in Dallas, Jamar Chase, he's holding in Cincinnati. So is Brandon Ayuk in San Francisco. 3 wide receivers that fantasy managers love to gravitate toward and want to start in their fantasy leagues, but none of them are practicing with their teams right now. And in the case of Lamb, he's not even with the team. Jamey, I'll start with you. What are you doing with these guys? Let's start with Lamb. Just Lamb. Where do you have him in your rankings? And is he moving up or down or where?
He's still third, so he's behind McCaffrey, who I'm sure you're happy about. He's behind McCaffrey. He's behind Tyreek Hill. I made that move a couple weeks ago to put Tyreek Hill ahead of CeeDee Lamb. Right now, after that, I have the next 2 running backs in Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson. If we get to the weekend and Lamb has not made has not signed his deal, then he'll slide behind the running backs. I haven't gotten to the point yet where I'm going to drop him behind Justin Jefferson, who is my 3rd wide receiver. But obviously, it's time to get concerned. And I just did another draft to benefit St. Jude. Thank you for everybody who's been donating for our draftathon. I had the 7th pick and Lamb fell to 7. So that's the furthest I've seen him fall so far. And that's, I've probably done 30 best ball drafts and 20 or so redraft drafts. And that's the farthest I've seen Lamb go.
Katie, you're higher or lower than 7th overall on CeeDee Lamb?
I would probably agree with where you are, but I will say when we're talking about these kind of things, it always makes me reevaluate my life when someone is offered $33 million a year and they're like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm like, well, what am I doing? But I agree with you when you say I'm not too worried about CeeDee Lamb here. I think if he's your guy, he should probably stay your guy. This is still a very ideal place for him in terms of fantasy managers because it's a pass-heavy offense. You got a competent quarterback in Dak Prescott who led the league in passing touchdowns last year, and I believe CeeDee Lamb led the league in red zone targets last year, and maybe there's a little bit of regression there typically. However, who else are they going to be throwing to? Diana Rossini did report that she heard from 2 different sources that this deal will get done very soon, so I think he'll be there week 1.
I hope the deal is done soon because we're getting up on 2 weeks before their first game. And we've seen this all the time with players who are holding out. If they show up a week before week 1, they're not ready. And it could take him a little while to be ready.
I think it's more concerning with running backs as opposed to receivers. We just had on our podcast today Marty Jaramillo, who's one of the industry doctors, who does a lot of fantasy shows. And Marty was on with us, and we asked him the question, is there any concern about injuries when it comes to these holdouts? And he said, these guys are training in their own facilities and doing so much work on their own. It's not like the old days where they're just sitting back drinking beer. These guys are getting ready to go and getting ready for the season.
Like the old days.
I don't think that in the case of certainly for Lamb and for Ayuk, for Chase and for Ayuk, who are with their teams, they're obviously doing stuff to get themselves ready to go. For Lamb, having seen him train in the offseason, he does some work down here in South Florida. I'm sure he's going to be up to speed and ready to go. So as long as it's done soon, no issues. But I don't think it's the same like running backs. Like Josh Jacobs last year, we had the concern about him getting ramped up. Not the same for me.
See, it is for me. And so I'm getting a little nervous. I moved Lamb down. I took the plunge that you haven't taken yet, but you will take him. I've got him 10th overall, so 7th is still a little too rich for my blood. I would take Jefferson.
Can't wait to draft with you.
Chase, absolutely. I'm not going to get CeeDee Lamb. You can get him at 9th if you're drafting in the 9th pick. And
I'm taking the 3rd. I'm not worried.
But it's with the caveat that obviously if he signs by the weekend or maybe even 5-6 days from now, then he would absolutely go right back up to where he was as my top-ranked wide receiver. So I'm a big fan of his. You mentioned Chase and Ayuk. They've been with their team, Katie, so they know what's going on. They just haven't practiced. I think in the case of Chase, he'll be back. Chase is a receiver I'll take ahead of CeeDee Lamb. Where do you come out on Jamar Chase, Katie?
Jamar Chase, for some reason, I'm a little bit more worried about him. He's got 2 years left on his deal, which is different than obviously CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Ayuk here. And you got Ocho Cinco saying that he doesn't think he's going to play at all, or at least start the season, if they don't get a deal done. Now, of course, I do think that the Bengals are motivated to do this. And even if he does sit out week 1, these things typically don't last too much much longer than that. But if I look at someone like Jamar Chase, I think he's got a really high ceiling, but I would actually take Amon-Ra St. Brown over him, who's got a higher floor, especially when you look at this Detroit team that have 14 of their 17 games in a dome, NFL really catering to Jared Goff. And I do think the quarterback situation is a little bit more stable than maybe a Justin Jefferson.
I'm always going for the ceiling play. And you know, when it comes to that, it's Jamar Chase. We saw 9 games with Joe Burrow last year, averaging over 20 PPR points per game. In 2022, when they were both healthy, obviously Chase had the hip injury, over 20 points per game. You know, I love what Amon-Ra St. Brown did last year. I think he's going to be fantastic. And you're right, he does have a safer floor. You know, that's something you have to take into account, because him and A.J. Brown, their floors are very safe if you're talking about those top 6 wide receivers. But when it comes to who can be the number 1 wide receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown did a lot to get to 10 touchdowns last year. Chase can do that still, and I think given a healthy Joe Burrow, there's going to be a Bengals onslaught this year. So I'm taking Chase over St. Brown. I'm taking Chase over almost everybody except for Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, and CeeDee Lamb, not in that order.
Jamey likes to live dangerously.
Yeah, that's a little dangerous for me. I like the safe play in St. Brown. I almost said Ayuk because that's who I want to bring up next. But St. Brown for me over Chase in full PPR. It might be a different story in non-PPR, half PPR. Ayuk, where do you come out on him, James?
I'm almost out on him. You know, this is a situation where, not because I don't love the player, it's a target crunch. You know, and when you look at it, he was so efficient last year, but 114 targets is hard to say he's going to be still an elite level fantasy producer. Deebo Samuel, as you know, is crushing it in camp, and I think a healthy Deebo Samuel has top 10, if not top 5 upside, especially with the caveat that you get if something happens to McCaffrey, who's dealing with the calf injury right now. As much as I think they'll use Elijah Mitchell and Jordan Mason and Isaac Guerrero, they'll use Deebo Samuel a little bit more in the backfield. We might get that 2021 Deebo Samuel. So he's my favorite 49ers receiver, and it's not close. I would take him in round 2. I'm not taking Brandon Ayuk till almost round 4, and he's gone by that point in most drafts.
First of all,
I saw that face. Hold on, did you see that face for a second?
I don't disagree with you at all. I'm just surprised that you said it. I mean, as a 49ers fan, I'm kind of out on Ayuk right now. Of all of these situations of people holding in or holding out, this has got to be the most annoying one out of all of them. I thought it was kind of like the meme that you see a lot for the Notebook, where it's like, what do you want? She's like, it's not that simple. What do you want? What do you want, Ayuk? What do you want? I guess the 49ers have gotten up to close to $30 million. Now they're trying to work out something on the 4th year. I just don't know if you hold out this long. I'm confident that a deal gets done and that Ayuk will be a 49er. I don't think he's going to the Steelers. It seems to be what he wants. When you hold
Do you think he could be going to the Commanders after the trade they made?
No, I think he wants to be. I think he wants to be a 49er. I really do.
I think he wants to get paid.
Yeah.
But then why didn't he go to the Patriots?
That's
he was
true.
going to get paid
No,
at the Patriots.
I mean, look, he's got the ability to dictate where he wants to go. And so if it's stay in San Francisco or go to New England, he's staying in San Francisco. If it's looking at Pittsburgh right now and staying in San Francisco, he's staying in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But if it's maybe to go play with his college quarterback at ASU, I think a lot of people forget Daniels played there.
Right.
Yeah.
If it's to go there and now there's an opening, especially that they could maybe come up to the asking price, then okay, I'll go do that. Because remember, at the start of all this, that was where everybody thought he was going, is Washington. And so the trade today has to raise the antennas for everybody in San Francisco, is that, okay, are they now trying to create some space, not only from a playing time standpoint, he was going to be the star receiver no matter what, but now open up a roster spot, and now we go get the money to go get him, plus another draft pick as compensation. So it wouldn't be surprising if that's where it ends up.
Like Lamb, I did move Ayuk down a little bit, but I was very bullish on Ayuk to begin with. I think he's now a round 3 pick, but I think Justin Jefferson is the number 2 or 3 wide receiver, depending on what the league scoring system is overall. And I'm getting asked a lot about the impact of Sam Darnold there. And I didn't watch Sam Darnold's reps in his preseason game, first game in Minnesota. I thought he looked pretty good. And I wonder if Darnold is a good enough quarterback to get Justin Jefferson going.
That's how you always feel about Sam Darnold when you see him once.
Yeah. And then once he starts feeling the pressure, he will fall apart. So it sounds like maybe you're out on Justin Jefferson?
I'm not out on Justin Jefferson, but he's not someone that I would take super high considering the quarterback situation. First of all, there were people last year that were willing to put their hard-earned money on Sam Darnold to be the MVP of the league last year. So sure, maybe with Kevin Stefanski, that is a little bit of or O'Connell, right? No, yeah, O'Connell. That should be a bit of a step up here for him. But the reality is he's a glorified Nick Mullins, I think. These are guys that are going to get you a ton of yardage, but they're going to throw a lot of picks as well. Now, the good news is Justin Jefferson last year averaged about 22 fantasy points per game with Nick Mullins. So I do think that there's some good targets there for him, especially when you look at Jordan Addison, potential suspension and injury, and then also TJ Hawkinson, both injured. But I'm not as high on Jefferson because, guys, Sam Darnold's not it.
Jamey, take it away.
Say exactly again. Glorified Nick Mullins,
Nick Mullins.
Right? I'm perfect with that. I'm absolutely perfect with that. And especially Nick Mullins is still there.
Yeah.
And so should Sam Darnold turn into Sam Darnold? This isn't, can Sam Darnold lead the Vikings to the playoffs? This isn't, is Sam Darnold going to be a good quarterback? This is Sam Darnold going to feature Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
And the three of us know to feature Justin Jefferson. So Sam Darnold is going to throw picks. Sam Darnold is going to have ugly plays. Sam Darnold is going to be bad. But that's not going to necessarily mean Justin Jefferson will be bad. Would you like to see a better quarterback? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins was fantastic for him. But you said it, Nick Mullins, what those guys did together, it's going to be 10 to 12 to maybe 15 targets per game for Justin Jefferson, especially with Addison banged up and potential suspension, Hawkinson banged up. This is the Justin Jefferson show. He is the NFL leader in yards per game by almost 11 in NFL history over Calvin Johnson. That tells you how good this guy is. He is going to produce at the level that you hope for, despite how bad it will be. So while he may be chasing pick sixes on occasion, he's also going to score quite a bit. So Sam Darnold is still okay. And I think that the bigger question for me is, did people really think that J.J. McCarthy was going to come in and save Justin Jefferson?
It's not about saving him. It's about being more efficient. Yes, I thought that he could have done that.
But why?
Yes.
He's a rookie quarterback who didn't throw the ball to the level that a lot of college quarterbacks do. And so this guy was going to all of a sudden make Justin Jefferson safe? No. It's the system. The system is going to make Justin Jefferson
I think
safe.
McCarthy could have eventually evolved into a better quarterback than
Agreed.
Sam Darnold, but
Agreed.
it might not have happened, to your point, until about week 6 or week 7, and that's when they're
Or week 6 or week 7 of 2025. I mean, we don't know that.
Well, now we know it's not going to be until
Sam
2025.
Darnold is going to just put the ball out there enough that Justin Jefferson is going to make plays.
I agree. Double-digit targets week in and week out for Justin Jefferson. I'm sorry to cut you off there because we got to go back to one more player on your team before we hit the break. Christian McCaffrey, calf injury. Obviously no preseason games. Really just now starting to think about him getting back to practice. Is anybody wavering on taking him with the first overall pick in a draft? Nope. Anybody?
No.
I know you're not, Katie.
No.
Jamie, you're saying no. I agree with both of you. Christian McCaffrey is our consensus 101. And if you've got that beautiful first pick in your draft, PPR, non-PPR.
Come on.
I mean, I might not take him first if it's a super flex league. That might be a quarterback. But outside of that, I can't let somebody like Christian McCaffrey, with his upside, 24 PPR points per game, that type of upside, and you know they can get up in the 40-point range, I can't let him go. When we come back, we are going to go on the clock. I'm going to show you guys some teams that are in the process of being built. You'll tell me which of the players that are available you'll like. If you want to look at how to build a roster for your fantasy team, stick right here on Fantasy Football Today. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. We talk a lot about teams. We review teams after they're drafted, and we talk about strategies before a draft happens, but we've never really tried to talk about strategy in the middle of a draft. So what I went ahead and did is found 4 rosters in mid-draft form. So they've already have a couple players on. There's a best available list of who's there. Who would you guys take from the best available list? And let's talk about how we'd start building some of these teams. So let's look at our very first team. Remember, these are not completed teams yet. These are simply teams that just have a couple of players on them. This one has 2. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Travis Etienne. So maybe they're picking in the middle of round 1. And for the sake of this exercise, PPR league, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 flex spot. Jamie, you look at the best available list. These are the best guys that are left. Is there one name that stands out to you that you would take with your pick?
I already know what you're going to say.
I think we're on the same page. Yeah, it's Deebo Samuel. So you pass the running backs here. You should never go receiver, running back. I don't think that's the smart way to build your fantasy team. So it would be between Deebo Samuel and Chris Olave. And again, I think Deebo's going to have a big year. You have, the potential of if something happens to McCaffrey, he'll get more carries than he's already going to get. And I think based on all the training camp reports, he's going to be wide receiver 1 even if Ayuk does show up. So very excited about him. He's an easy round 2 pick for me.
You're not worried that he lost some weight?
No, I like that. I think he'll be faster and quicker.
Yeah, we like it when they lose weight. We don't like it when they gain weight. That's all.
Unless you're an offensive lineman, don't lose weight.
Right.
Okay, that
Absolutely.
makes sense.
But Debo, that would be your pick as well over Olave.
I would say yes, Debo, but I know you said not to go running back, which I understand. But I do like Rachaad White. I think he had a great season last season on the ground and through the air, specifically through the air. I do think that who they drafted this year might cut into that, but I think Rachaad White is still like a low-end RB1.
I think you can get a good running back in round 4. You saw White on the board. He probably wouldn't make it back to you, but Jacobs might. Kenneth Walker could be there. Joe Mixon could be there. So waiting on running back seems like a good idea. If Ayuk is still in San Francisco, though, I'll take Chris Olave. I think he'll get more targets. I like the way that he finished last year. Love this new offensive scheme that the New Orleans Saints have put in, and I think there's a target boost coming for Chris Olave. And I like him in late round 2. If I'm getting him in round 3, I love it. All right, so that's the first team. Let's take a look at the second team that we've got. This is a team that's probably picking a little bit earlier in round 1. We see that Breece Hall is on this roster. Drake London in round 2. Jamie, I've been getting pushback on Drake London as a second-round pick lately. People are saying, what is he doing in round 2? He should be later than that. We could talk about that if you want to. But this team got London in round 2, Laporta in round 3. So one of each of those first 3 positions. Who do you like here, Jamie, as far as the best available player in round 4?
Yeah, same thing. It's going to be a wide receiver. Love the setup for DK Metcalf. I would actually take him in round 3. So new offense in Seattle with Ryan Grubb. I know you don't want to hear this as a 49ers fan, but I think they're going to run more plays. They're going to be a little bit more explosive. And so Metcalf, while JSN, Jackson Smith and the Jigba, is going to have a bigger role and Tyler Lockett's still there, we could see the best of Metcalf, which we haven't seen in the last couple of years. He's been out-targeted by Tyler Lockett most of his career. I think this is the year where Metcalf starts to look like the alpha that we saw earlier in his career. He's taking a little bit of a step back recently, but I think he takes a step forward in this offense.
Katie, who do you like?
You guys aren't going to agree with me on this one. I'm going to go quarterback on this one and take Lamar Jackson. I just worry because I think he's much more valuable than some of like the mid-level quarterbacks that might be still available when you come back around. You look at Lamar Jackson. He had an incredible year last year through the air. Todd Monken's second-year offense with him. I don't think that Derrick Henry is going to cut into his ability to be the rusher that he is either, or to really take away from his touchdown. So I would probably see Lamar Jackson there and be like, I gotta get him.
3 different analysts, 3 different answers. I like Ken Walker for kind of the same reasons that you pointed out with DK Metcalf. It's a new offense there. I think he's going to be the feature back for the Seahawks. I don't think Zach Charbonnet is going to take much work away from him. Could be a career year type of season for Ken Walker. And just like we talked about with the first team, I think you can come back in the next round and get a pretty good wide receiver. I don't think DK Metcalf would make it back to you, but I think that there are some other wide receivers in both round 5 and round 6 that you could go after. I really like the receivers in the round 6 range in ADP, by the way. But Kenneth Walker, we saw last year when he got the work, his fantasy average was huge, and I think that we could see more of that this year. I am a fan of Kenneth Walker. I might take him in round 3 in some leagues, but if I can get him in round 4, that's a player that I'm definitely on board with. We're moving on to the next team, the third team. This team already has 4 players drafted. Let's take a look at what they've got. Looks like they're picking toward the end of round 1, beginning of round 2. A.J. Brown at receiver, Kyron Williams, Alvin Kamara after that, and Trey McBride. So they've got their 2 running backs picked. So there isn't a best available running back, because I think it's a mistake if you take a third running back after you've already taken 2. But maybe you could. I don't know. There's that flex spot. But here's who's best available. You tell me who you like, Jamie, from T. Higgins, George Pickens, Rashee Rice, and Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, first off, I'd fire this fantasy manager for taking Kamara in round 3, so that's a wasted pick.
Okay.
But I'm going to take the best available receiver here, which would be T. Higgins. Love the setup for him. You know, I think a lot of people forget just how good he is, and he's having a monster camp, motivated for a new deal. You know, we talk about CeeDee Lamb not showing up for his contract situation, and Jamar Chase's teammate holding in, and Ayuk holding in. This guy is on the franchise tag, has every reason to not show up, and he's going to go out and finally show everybody just how great he has been, despite the fact that he's been banged up the last couple of seasons. So killing in camp, going to get paid this offseason, and I think he's just continuing to rise up the ranks. So it's between him and Rashee Rice, who are basically back-to-back for me.
Yeah.
But I think Higgins' upside is just amazing, because not only do you have the fact that he's great on his own, if Chase misses time, he's got top 5 upside. There's not a lot of people that have that.
Yeah, and I'm going to go on the other side of that and take Rashee Rice on this one. I kind of think it's a no-brainer to take him, even though I know you said you wouldn't take wide receivers. Because, look, you got your stud wide receiver, elite tight end. You got your running backs, obviously, covered. Yes, maybe he will be suspended, although it seems to be trending that that's not going to happen. So if he is suspended, I still think there's good value here. And then if not, he could be a steal.
3 different analysts, 3 different answers. And I think this is a tough call between Higgins, Rice, and Pickens.
Yeah.
Higgins, to me, I would worry about if Jamar Chase is playing. And so if he's not playing, Jamie, you are absolutely right. The dude would be a bona fide number 1.
He's been bad when Chase has been playing?
He hasn't been as good as other wide receivers has, and certainly is right around the ADP of where he's being taken. He's okay when Chase is playing, and we saw that last year. We saw that the year before. But when Chase is out, T. Higgins has been outstanding. But George Pickens seems like it's a sure thing that he's going to be the number one receiver in Pittsburgh. The quarterback situation is ugly right now. That preseason game was terrible. I'm going to bank, and it wasn't long ago when everybody kind of felt the same way about Pickens, that he was just going to get a lot of volume. These projections feel low to me, especially when it comes to the targets. I think he can get over 120. I don't think they have a choice. They've got all these other weapons in the passing game. I just don't think they're as good as Pickens. He's the playmaker there. I think that he can outperform T. Higgins with Chase and Rashee Rice with all the other weapons that we're adding in Kansas City. We will agree to do you have Higgins ahead of Pickens in your rankings?
Oh, yes, for sure.
Okay,
Absolutely.
I like Pickens better. We'll see how that one hangs out by the time the season ends. We've got one team left. This team already has 4 players. We're going to give them 2 more players, but look at how they've started. It's Garrett Wilson and Puka Nacua, so maybe they're picking toward the end of the 1-2 turn.
Finally, a smart team.
This is a team that went 0 RB. And Travis Kelce in round 3, Mike Evans in round 4. Here's who's available, though. You could get Neighbors, but you can't start them. And then otherwise, you've got Montgomery, Ramon Stevenson, Zamir White. Jamie, do you pass up Neighbors? You get 2 of these guys. Who are you taking?
Oh, I'm definitely taking Malik Neighbors. I'm taking the best player available here, and he's the best player by far. Montgomery in a timeshare with Jahmyr Gibbs. Who knows how that's going to play itself out. Stevenson I like, but I don't love. At this spot, I'm taking Malik Neighbors, and I'm just going to say, okay, I'll deal with my running back situation later. I'd rather just have the opportunity to, A, if I need him, because Mike Evans 31, but B, if he's a trade chip at worst, that's a pretty good piece to have on your team. So I would much rather go with Malik Neighbors over those other players.
I agree.
Who would you take with Malik?
I would take David Montgomery with Malik Neighbors. I think that, especially with the improved defense with the Lions, it could be a very big year for Dave Montgomery. If they're up a lot, he's going to be the guy getting all of the goal line touches. And then if they're not, obviously more pass catching would be Gibbs. But I think I like Dave Montgomery here.
It is really hard to recommend taking a player who might begin the year on your bench in round 5. But Malik Neighbors might push one of those other receivers that you had to the bench at some point.
Yeah.
I can't pass up that value either. I love Malik Neighbors in round 3 if he's available in round 5. I've heard from people saying that he's in round 6, round 8. I couldn't believe it when I heard it. I want to get in those leagues. Malik Neighbors is someone who stands out to me, who's got huge upside. I know the quarterback situation is bad in New York. He's going to, it's almost like the argument that I made for Pickens. He's going to get a ton of targets, should be able to do well. I think Malik Neighbors is absolutely worth taking, but I would take Zamir White because the argument you made for Montgomery is goal line guy, going to get a lot of touchdowns there, and Detroit's offense is way better than Las Vegas's offense. Wow. I think Zamir White has that role and more for the Raiders. I'm willing to take my chances with him to be my RB1 in a 0 RB build. So I've loaded up at wide receiver, got my stud tight end, I'll find a stud quarterback later, and I'm settling at running back if Zamir White's going to be my top guy.
The problem with these 2 guys, though, is that Zamir White and David Montgomery might produce the same right now. Gibbs misses time. Montgomery is a potential top 10 running back.
That's fair.
Zamir White does not have that if
he
somebody
doesn't
else
have that
misses time.
contingency up.
And you're starting to see, based on the preseason, that Madison may get a little bit bigger role, Dylan Lobby may get a little bit of a bigger role, Amir Abdullah may get a little bit of a bigger role. It might not be the Zamir White show that we were expecting. So on their own, if you tell me they both play in their current roles, I hope White is better than Montgomery.
Sure.
But Montgomery's ceiling could be absolutely immense. Like you said, if Gibbs does not show up because of that hamstring, David Montgomery is going to be one of these league-winning type of guys based on where you get him.
Totally understand that point, and it's not a bad one. When we come back, Jamie and I are going to go head-to-head, and Katie's going to be our judge. The players we differ on the most, the best-case scenario and the bust-case scenario. You're not going to want to miss this. Ask FFT. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. We know you're getting ready for your drafts this weekend. We're here to help. Dave, Katie, Jamie, nice to meet you. And we're a happy bunch here, but sometimes we disagree a little bit, and Jamie and I we've been working together a long time, so we have a lot of friendly disagreements. And I thought we'd do a segment called Best Case or Bust Case. And Katie, you're going to be the judge. You're going to hear our very short arguments for 6 different players that Jamie and I differ on a little bit. Not necessarily, I think he's a number 1 receiver. No, he should be on the bench or shouldn't be drafted. But we are going to go through some players that we don't like, that one of us really doesn't like as much as the other one doesn't like. So the first player is Davante Adams. And man, we've been talking about Davante for now 2 straight preseasons. And last year, you were pretty much right on him. I still like him this year. I think that there is still a case for Davante Adams to be taken as a round 3 pick and to return value on that. Averaged over 15 PPR points per game last year. That was with bad quarterbacks. 10 games with Aiden O'Connell last year, 16.2 PPR points per game, including 19.7 in his last 4. And there is some upside with him. We saw 2 games last year from Davante Adams, including one late in the season, over 30 PPR points. So he still has it in his game. I think he's still worth a round 3 pick. I still think he's a top 15 receiver.
He's definitely a round 3 pick. I think I have him just outside the top 15. I think he's 16th for me. You mentioned it. He went from 19 points per game 2 years ago to 15 points per game last year. Is there going to be a continued downward trend for him? And if you see the projections here that Sportsline has, this is a guy that's gotten 175 plus targets in 2 years with the Raiders. At 153, if his efficiency continues to crater like it did last year, that could be absolutely awful. So if you're taking him in early round 3, the only reason I have him in round 3 is because I push wide receivers up. So because I have wide receivers so high, 16 wide receivers in round 3, I think I have 20 in the first 3 rounds. So I'm not necessarily saying run away from him, but when you start to compare him to other guys at the position, should not be the 10th receiver, should not be a top 12 guy. 16 or later, easy for me. But I'm not reaching for Davante Adams, and I'm scared that at 31 years old, there's been 63 wide receivers in the last 10 years that have played at 31 years or older. Only 8 have been top 12 number 1 receivers. So while I'm an old man myself, I am running away from the old man.
For the record, I'm also not drafting you in the first 2 rounds in fantasy. All right, Katie, where do you come out on Davante Adams?
Well, some good points were made on both sides, but I think I lean a little bit more on your side, Dave. I just think that Davante, yes, he's older, and I get that it was trending downward a little bit, but he's an elite target earner, right? The ability for him to do that is amazing. You look at the quarterbacks in this situation, both of them are going to be heavily reliant on their first read option, which of course is going to be Davante Adams. And when you look at the secondaries in the AFC West, they're a little bit subpar, especially when you look at the Chiefs, who no longer have Snead.
Sure, that's absolutely a factor. And then think about what Michael Pittman did last year.
Didn't score touchdowns.
He didn't score touchdowns, but it was a different type of offense that ran the ball like crazy.
And the Raiders aren't?
And the Raiders want to be, but I still think Davante Adams is going to get his targets. I don't think he's going to be efficient, but I think he'll be good. I think he's worth that 3rd round pick. Okay, next best case or bust case is Jalen Waddle. You like him more than I do, Jamie. Tell me why.
Love Jalen Waddle. I mean, this is a guy that was banged up a good portion of last year, but he plays on the most pass-friendly offense in the NFL. Yeah. And you have the 2 things that are working for him, very similar to what we talked about with T. Higgins before. On his own, he's a top 15 wide receiver. Should something happen to Tyreek Hill, which, by the way, we saw last year against one of the toughest secondaries when he faced the Jets, had a 2-touchdown game in that performance against that secondary. He's going to be an absolute monster. And Tyreek Hill, banged up with a hand injury right now, who's 30 years old. So Waddle got his contract. Odell Beckham, who people thought might be a factor, where's he been? Not playing. Yeah. Malik Washington could be a factor. He's a rookie. Don't even worry about him. Jonnu Smith, who's getting some pub as the tight end there, they're going to use multiple tight ends. Jalen Waddle is locked into a starring role, and in his first 2 years, he was an absolute stud. Year 3 was derailed because of injuries. Year 4, he gets back on track, plays 80+% of the snaps. I don't think they're chasing 2,000 yards for Tyreek Hill either, which impacted Jalen Waddle's production last year. He's going to be an absolute stud. Love him in round 2.
So from your lips to the fantasy gods' ears, because I think everybody would love to see that from Jalen Waddle, I just don't know if it's going to happen. And you mentioned that he was hurt last year. He's already been hurt in training camp this year. He's missed 2 weeks of practice already, just now getting back on the field. 1 year in his career where he's averaged north of 15 PPR points per game. And this is the stat that really threw me off. Tua Tagovailoa over the last 2 seasons, 30 games, only in 9 of them have both Tyreek and Waddle had 15-plus PPR points each. And that scares me because I know Tyreek is going to get his. And I love Waddle as a player. There's a lot of players I like this year as talent. I just don't like their situation. I don't like him as the second fiddle. And then the last point is last year, whenever Tyreek and H.M. were healthy, Waddle did nothing on the field. He was really like a third option in those games. So I'm taking a very cautious approach with Jalen Waddle this year.
All right, we're tied because now I'm leaning more on Jamie's side. I just feel like Waddle's like a yak monster, which of course there's a lot of people on that team that are that. Tyreek is going to get most of the volume here, but like you said, at 30 years old, I don't know if that's necessarily the right approach because we saw what happened at the end of last season when Tyreek got a little bit run into the ground. He's got that hand issue. Obviously, you don't want to do a thumb war with Mike McDaniel now that he's like Miami viced out. So I do like Waddle here.
Next receiver is Amari Cooper. 30 years old. I'll give the best case for Amari Cooper, who's falling a little bit in drafts. He looks like he's around a round 5, round 6 pick, and I think that that's a fair spot for him. Last year, with Deshaun Watson, 17.6 PPR points per game. It's a small sample size because Deshaun Watson didn't play a lot with Cooper, but when Joe Flacco was on the field with Cooper, those numbers popped again. So anytime he's got a competent passer, I like Amari Cooper as the number 1 receiver for the Cleveland Browns. And think about that Browns offense. They might want want to run the ball. Nick Chubb isn't there to begin the year. We don't know what Nick Chubb will be like by the time we get to the midpoint of the year. I think Amari Cooper is a wide receiver 2 to start the season, and then he might trail off a little bit when Chubb is back and he's the number 3 wide receiver. I'm okay with him in that round 5-6 range.
I'm definitely taking Amari Cooper in round 5, but I don't have him ranked as a number 2 receiver simply because wide receiver 20 through 36 is a number 2 receiver for me. So it's probably semantics just in terms of where they're ranked. In terms of taking him in round 5, I'm perfectly fine with it. The concern would be is Deshaun Watson hurt his shoulder last year, and oh, by the way, he's got a sore shoulder right now. Plus, like you said, he's 30. They add Jerry Jeudy. Is David Njoku going to completely go away even though he struggled with Watson? No, he's going to be a factor. We'll see Elijah Moore still catching passes. We'll see Cedric Tillman, who's gotten some pub this offseason, catching passes. And you say, yes, the run game may struggle. It struggled last year, and they still ran the ball a ton because that's what this offense does under Kevin Stefanski. So I like Amari Cooper, but again, trending in the wrong direction. When you start to get 30 years old at that wide receiver spot, you slow down. We saw a little bit of it last year. I think we're going to see more of it this year.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with Jamey on this one. I just feel like Amari Cooper is like wildly inconsistent. His numbers last year looked pretty good, but there was that Houston game where he had like 51.
Yep.
Yeah. So without Deshaun Watson, I think it dropped to like 12.4, 12.5 or something, and then did it get a little better? And with Deshaun Watson being healthy, it should get better, but we haven't seen Deshaun Watson be back at his full form yet. Oh, okay, yeah.
No. I mean, I'm ready to move on. I think that Jamie's points are good on Amari Cooper. I think he's the receiver that fantasy managers just don't want to draft, and they'll settle for him.
I will say this, though. The non-Joe Flacco, Deshaun Watson quarterbacks really weighed him down last year. Jameis Winston actually might be good for Amari Cooper.
I think he'll have a Flacco like a Flacco.
And maybe better than Deshaun Watson because Jameis don't give a bleep, and he's just going to throw the ball all over the place.
I love him.
He gives a bleep. He just gives a bleep about his numbers and what he thinks is right for the offense. All right, quarterbacks. We both agree that Kyler Murray is a top 10 quarterback. You're just way more in on Kyler than I am. Make the best case for Kyler Murray.
Oh, when we've seen Kyler at his best his first 2 seasons, he was, one of the better fantasy quarterbacks, and he's sort of flirted with top 5 finishes. He's flirted with top 5 finishes in portions of the season. He just hasn't been able to do it for a full year. But what we saw last year coming back from the ACL tear, he was still running at a high level, which was a little surprising that he was still going to do that because typically you see the best of those running quarterbacks or runners 2 years removed from the injury. Now you give him this alpha of Marvin Harrison Jr. and a second alpha in Trey McBride, and that's just going to enhance his game. So running quarterbacks, what they do, you cannot match the production if he gets anything close to 800 yards rushing. Now, he's yet to do that in his career, but he's also been a little bit hampered, I think, by the previous coaching staff. This coaching staff under Rob Petzik, I think, will allow him to be the runner that we know he's capable of being with those little tiny footsteps are going 100,000 miles. Mighty Mouse is going 100,000 miles an hour. So I love the upside of him. And I just think, again, we could see a top 5 finish for Kyler Murray this year. By all accounts, this has been his best offseason in the NFL. His entire receiving core, running backs, tight ends, everybody spends time working out with him. You haven't heard one thing about Call of Duty. He is as prepared as he's ever been, and I think he's going to take the league by storm. Could be an MVP candidate. The Cardinals are actually playoff contention.
I just don't love that each of the last 3 seasons, and it's a different offense. Drew Petzing has only been with him for this past year.
Drew Petzing.
You said Rob Petzing, we apologize, but under 24 PPR points per game. So I think that he's got the safety of being a top 10 type of fantasy quarterback, can get you in that 22-point range, and that's awesome. Does he have the upside with a rookie as his number 1 receiver to get to that 25, 26-point range? Is he going to run enough? I think he'll run a lot in the red zone. I think he'll score a lot of touchdowns there, and that might take away some touchdowns from his other guys, but I am a little bit worried about him really hitting that 24, 25-point ceiling. We haven't seen that from him in the last 3 years.
I'm going to agree with you on this one. I think he's a great value pick. He always has a couple games where he's has some stinkers. I feel like that's going to happen again this year, but you could do a lot worse.
Last name is James Conner, and we've gone back and forth on James Conner. I'll make the best case for James Conner as a great value in round 5. He's given you at least 15 PPR points each of the last 3 seasons. This is Kyler Murray's running buddy in Arizona. And yeah, he's missed some games, but what running back doesn't miss a few games over the course of a season? And Conner, the model of consistency, and I liked what I saw from him in this offense when Kyler Murray came back last year. Those last 8 games, Jamie, almost 18 PPR points per game from James Conner. If I'm drafting a running back that has that kind of upside in round 5 or round 6, man, I'm loving it. This is a guy who's a safe RB2 for me.
First of all, don't take a running back in round 5. Look at the values based on average draft position on what the receivers are there. You're going to get much better value out of the wide receivers. He's an old man. He's 29 years old at this position, and that is ancient. He's collecting Social Security at this point. You look at what he's done for the last 5 seasons, 3+ games that he's missed. There's a reason why they drafted his backup, who could eventually replace him at some point during the season, and that's Trey Benson. On top of the fact, yes, he was great last year. First year averaging 5 yards per carry. First year with 1,000 yards. That tells you something. He hasn't done that yet because he's had a hard time staying on the field. So when he's healthy, hopefully he will produce at that level. But his passing game numbers in Drew Petzik's offense cratered. And now you're bringing in Marvin Harrison Jr. and still Trey McBride. This is a very tight end friendly offense. So when we see Kyler Murray escape, it's not dumping off the running backs. Last year we saw it, whether it was Josh Dobbs or Kyler Murray, it was to Zach Ertz and then McBride. So the dump off passes don't go to the running backs here. They go to the tight ends. I think Connor's going to be good. I just don't think he's going to be great. Please do not take him in round 5.
I agree with Jamey on this one. I just think he misses too much time. 3 or 4 games, I think, a season, he's out. So
all right, well,
he was exciting to watch.
We will agree to disagree on James Conner, and we made some very good cases, and we hope we helped you with some polarizing players that you'll encounter in your draft. But I think one thing that we can all agree on is that having a sleepers list when you go into a draft is a good idea. So when we come back, the sleepers that we promised at the beginning of the show, each of us with 2 players that you will find after your 100th overall pick on draft day. Keep it right here on Fantasy Football Today. So a lot of fantasy managers will panic when they get to round 9, round 10 in their drafts. They're not sure who to take. We're here to help you out. We've got some sleepers that we like. Each of us picked 2 of our favorite players that have an average draft position after 100th overall that you can keep in mind when it comes to building out the rest of your team on draft day. You know which studs to pick. What about the sleepers at the end of the draft? Katie, 2 names that you like after 100th overall.
First, I'm going with Rico Dowdle. I think he's amazing. He could be RB1 in Dallas just because they don't have anybody else. And yes, I do think that Zeke is going to get a majority of work in the 5-yard line, within the 5-yard line, but he could be washed. He could get injured. I mean, a lot of things could happen with him. So I do like Rico Dowdle here, especially if you look at last season. He caught 17 of 22 targets, 144 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think it could be a good season for him. And then I'm looking at Jaden Daniels. Maybe Ayuk will be there for him, but even if not, Daniels is extremely athletic. He has been known to scramble. He's very excited to watch on the field, but he also had a pretty good passing game in college as well. You look at Cliff Kingsbury as his calling the plays here, and that's when Kyler Murray won his Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2019. So that's working out really well for him. Pretty solid O-line, serviceable receivers, maybe an Ayuk. I like Daniels.
Yeah, I like both of those names. Those are 2 guys that I've certainly targeted in my drafts once we get to that point. Jamey, 2 sleepers that you're on board with.
Yeah, I kind of put JSN more in a breakout than a sleeper category, but he is going to have to pick 100, so he qualifies for this. And I just think we're going to see a big season from him again in Ryan Grubb's offense. And so, Tyler Lockett at his age, 32 years old, hopefully continues to take a little bit of a step back. Obviously, DK Metcalf, like I said earlier, is going to be a stud, but we didn't see the best of JSN last year. It really was when one of the other 2 guys was missing that he stepped up and played at a higher level, but you've heard nothing but rave reviews offseason, and they're expecting a bigger role for him. So could start out as a 4th receiver on your fantasy team, could certainly work into 3 receiver sets, depending on how many receivers start in your league. Would not be shocking if, again, Tyler Lockett takes a huge step back, that we're talking about a top 30 wide receiver for him. And then for Chuba Hubbard, we know the situation. Jonathan Brooks is going to miss the beginning part of the season with his knee injury. Hubbard was fantastic down the stretch last year, 2 games over 20 PPR points once he started taking over from Miles Sanders, basically in the 11 to 12 PPR point per game range. Better offensive line, better system. And so Hubbard not only gets the benefit of the early season work as a stopgap option, but if they take their time with Brooks or Brooks has a setback, doesn't come back, you could be looking at the Panthers' best running back all season long. So very similar to Rico Dowdle, guy you can take in a similar range. Dowdle has much more long-term upside, at least I hope so, based on how things go in Dallas. I think if Jerry Jones was getting his way, Rico would change his name to Rico Dallas as opposed to Rico Dowdle, and maybe just go all in on the Cowboys.
Middle name Suave.
But in any event, Chuba Hubbard's a guy you can get really late and be good with to start the season.
And what's great about both of those running backs is that you can find them late, and you can potentially start them weeks 1 through 4. And then by then you find just another running back off the scrap heap. People who like to draft wide receivers early on in draft, they go the 0 RB approach. Those are the types of running backs that you want to go for. I really like the Chuba Hubbard call. Even though he's on Carolina, I think he's got a great chance to return value at that ADP. My 2 sleepers are both wide receivers. I'll start with Cortland Sutton, who's led the Broncos in targets per game each of the last 3 years and 4 out of the last 5 years. And before the preseason, I was scared of getting any Broncos on my fantasy team. But I saw this offense up close in Indianapolis in their preseason game, and I've kept tabs on what's going on out in Denver, and it looks like Sutton is the number 1 wide receiver again, and more importantly, Bo Nix, their rookie quarterback, has acquitted himself well. And so there's going to be an opportunity for Courtland Sutton to do a lot better than 88 targets over the course of the season. He should hit triple digits. And we're talking about a receiver in round 9 or round 10 that could begin the year as your wide receiver 3. And if things break right for him, maybe not in the way of touchdowns, but certainly in the way of catches and yards, I think he can end up being a low-end wide receiver 2 if he were to stay healthy for the whole season. Moving on to my other wide receiver sleeper, it's Joshua Palmer in LA with the Chargers. This is the only receiver that the Chargers have who's got multiple years of experience with Justin Herbert and has not missed much training camp time, if any. Now, Herbert's missed training camp time, but now he's starting to get back into the swing of things. I know Ladd McConkey is the rookie that they like. I think Ladd McConkey will get plenty of targets himself, but Josh Palmer is the one who's going after McConkey, and in some cases, he's going after around 12. So if you're looking for a receiver that you can get in like literally one of your last 3 picks before you pick up your DST, before you pick up your kicker, Josh Palmer makes a ton of sense to me as somebody who could come back and be a wide receiver 3. So those are 2 wide receivers that I like. The other sleepers that my crew likes, sleepers for you to go after 100th overall on draft day. When we come back, we're answering your fan questions. Hashtag AskFFT on X. You ask the questions, we're going to deliver answers right here on Fantasy Football Today. It's Fantasy Football Today on CBS Sports Network. We're here to serve you. We're going to answer your fan questions. Send in to us on X using the hashtag AskFFT. First one's from Joseph. Is it crazy to draft Richardson over Mahomes in a 10-team, 2-QB keeper league, Jamey?
Yes. Don't do it.
I know that it's fun to think about taking Richardson in a keeper league over Mahomes, thinking that he'll play longer, but you can't do that. You got to take Mahomes. Mahomes still has a bunch of years left. It's not like he's about to fall off an age cliff or something like that. Mahomes is the pick. Thank you. Next question from Poppy Champoo. I've never heard of that brand. Do you have faith in Kincaid and Ingram? Jamey?
Yeah, I think Kincaid's got a chance to be, one of the elite tight ends this year. Hopefully he'll, dominate targets in Buffalo, certainly over Dawson Knox. But, you look at this receiving core, with a rookie and Keon Coleman and, 2 guys that have really not necessarily established themselves as elite level pass catchers yet. Shakir hasn't really gotten that chance. Samuel hasn't necessarily struggled. And Ingram, look, he's coming off a big year last year where he led all tight ends in receptions. Christian Kirk's banged up again right now, dealing with a calf injury, so that was really what unlocked Ingram. So sure, both these guys should be top 8 tight ends.
I agree. Kincaid is the breakout candidate. Ingram more the safer guy in full PPR. He averaged around 11 PPR points per game before he had a huge breakout. Up next is Coach K. He was big at Duke. Who is the RB2 to own in Kansas City? So much buzz on Carson Steele. Jamey, it's a monumental moment on our show. First time we're talking about Carson Steele.
Yeah, I don't think it's Carson Steele, though. I'm still hopeful it's going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire, dealing with something that, it seems unfortunate, and hopefully he gets healthy and gets, everything straightened out, able to play this year. But if it's not him, I'm going to still go with Deneric Prince. I think he'll be the guy that steps up. Steele might have a role. Wouldn't be surprised if they go back and, get Jerick McKinnon. But at this point, if it's not CEH, for me, it's Prince.
I agree with you on every single count, including McKinnon. Wouldn't be surprised to see him back in Kansas City. Next, here's Tony. Hall, Bijan, or Chase with the 5th pick. This is a 16-team, 3-wide receiver league, Jamey.
Yeah, I'm still going to lean toward the running backs right now. So if you get a chance to take Hall, that's an easy one. Bijan would be my second choice and Chase right after it. But it's a pretty good spot to be in if you know you're going to get one of these top 3 players.
Agreed, 100%. Moving on to our next question. It's from Vince. Is Bo Nix a serious late-round QB pick?
Only in Superflex or 2 quarterback leagues. I think if you're taking him in a 1 quarterback league, you probably have missed out on a lot of quarterbacks, or a lot of people have taken 3. So I don't think you should take him in a 1 quarterback league, but in a Superflex or a 2 quarterback league, absolutely he should be drafted.
Stafford, Lawrence, Levis, all 3 quarterbacks, definitely better than Nix, and I could probably name about 5 more. Last question real quick, Jamey. Keep 2, 12-team PPR Superflex. Bijan in the 1st, Tyreek in the 1st, Achane in the 13th, Tua in the 11th.
Go Dolphins.
Tyreek and Tua. Superflex, I get it. Or are you going to keep Achane? There's 3 Dolphins there.
I'm sorry. Yes, the 2 with the late round picks, Achane and Tua. You can't pass up on Tua in a Superflex league, and Achane's value is just too good.
I think that's probably the best way to go and the safest way to go as well. I don't even think I can make the case for one of the first rounders and Tua. Achane in the 13th round, just too good. That's going to do it for this edition of Fantasy Football Today. Everybody's got a draft coming up this weekend, maybe 2 or 3 drafts. How many do you have coming up this weekend?
A lot.
Yeah, same here. We're going to get you ready for them, not only with this show and future shows, but also Fantasy Football Today. Download it wherever you get your podcasts. For Jamey and Katie, I'm Dave. Thanks for watching.